So the biggest reasons, when we look at the biggest reasons that people are facing homelessness, what they call the chronic homeless. So there's two main groups. We've got the chronic homeless, people that are homeless for years at a time, and then we have people like surge homeless. They're homeless for weeks and months at a time, which is what we're dealing with now. There's some overlap between those groups, and there's not a straight line, because some people start off for a few weeks and end up being homeless for years if they end up getting caught up in drugs or something like that. The biggest reasons that we see for chronic homelessness are mental health issues, and drug addiction issues and unemployability. Usually the unemployability happens because they are addicted to drugs. They sold drugs in order to be able to afford their habit. Instead of getting the care they needed, they were thrown into prison. They were let out of prison. Now they have a felony record. They're unemployable because no one wants to hire a drug addict who has a felony record. They're not able to get the care they need because it's illegal for anyone to provide them with detox services that aren't in coordination with corrections. So now they're living on the street because they have a bad addiction problem. They can't get a job, and they can't get a job because of their felony record. Now they can't get a job because they don't have an address or a phone number to be able to use, or at the very least they don't have an address. And then also they now have mental health issues, because it turns out that's all pretty traumatic. And if they didn't already have a mental health issue, they do now. There's a lot of trauma that comes from it. That's where the cycle of chronic homelessness goes. The surge homelessness, or the temporary homelessness, is typically just economic issues. Sometimes social issues like marriage is breaking up and someone lives on the street for a while. Usually it's they lost their job, and because the average American is about 2 to 3 paychecks away from utter destitution, they are unable to work. They lost a job for a month, and now they don't have a house. And so they're either living with friends or with family. During the pandemic, there's a lot less of that because people don't want to have people in their homes. And so now they're living out either on the streets, or they're living in hotels, or they're living in non-permanent housing, or in housing shelters. So we have to look at a few things there. First of all, the price of housing, especially in major metropolitan areas like this, the price of housing here is only partially reflected by market forces. So the reason why a lot of the rents are so high is because this is a high value area. This is where a lot of business is happening. There's a lot of people here. So there's a lot of extra demand, more so than the same plot of land back home in South Carolina, where there's nothing around, and so you could buy an acre for 20 grand. But that's why there's the top end of pricing. It doesn't explain why there's no affordable housing. It doesn't explain why there isn't a row of housing here that is apartments that are 300 to 400 square feet for an affordable price. It doesn't explain that. The reason for that is because of zoning. There are zoning laws that are put in place that voters vote for in exchange for their property values being preserved. Well, what that leads to is that people that are priced out of the market either have to move somewhere else, which they may not be able to afford to do, or it's just not have a home. And so that's why you see not just homelessness, but you'll see apartments that have way more people in them than were intended to have. Those people would be homeless if it wasn't for that. So it's the enforcement of things like zoning laws and the constant growing of building codes, which have not led to, when you see how much of a increase of homelessness and lack of access to housing security that it has led to, there has not been a synonymous growth of safety as a result of that. They're constantly ratcheting up building codes, which means that now if you are a developer and you already have X amount built into the price of any home that you build, in order to be able to satisfy the building codes, you're naturally going to build bigger, more expensive stuff, because now it's a smaller percentage of the overall amount that you're spending. So between zoning and building codes, that drives up the cost of housing. We look at economic problems like the fact that there's so much joblessness. Why do we have joblessness? Because